off. We're also going to switch to finance ahead of buildings and grounds, because we have some guests with us on that. So with that being said, oh, I'm assuming you have roll called already, you got that. Janet?
Yes, okay. We'll be eliminating letters A, B, and C this evening, and we'll be starting with letter D, and that's right to Mr. Reinhardt for Channel 39.
Yes, thank you. Letter D on the agenda is Channel 39. I wanted to bring to the board's attention that we make an annual contribution to Channel 39, and when I discussed this contribution this year with our administrative team and our building principals, it was pretty obvious that the only benefit, the only direct benefit, I should say, that we're receiving is the opportunity to participate in scholastic scrimmage. And that's an extremely important activity, but we all also believe we're in a position where we have to make some tough decisions about some of these contracts and some of these relationships. And my suggestion to the board, or my proposal to the board, is that we do not remain as members of the Channel 39 consortium of school districts, and that we do not approve that contract with them. Now, our students at the high school will still participate in what is known as PIAA scholastic scrimmage, where they, I don't know, Angie, could you explain to us what they do? And
the scholastic scrimmage is very similar, it's just that they are not televised.
they're not televised, right?
Basically, the only difference, and to pay, like you said, $16,000
Right.
is quite expensive, but they will still participate.
But they will be, we will
That's
have a
correct.
scholastic scrimmage team, they will
Yes.
compete against other high schools, but it will not be part of the televised Channel 39 experience.
Okay.
Question for Mr. Reinhardt.
Yes, sir.
It's a set fee?
Yes, it is, and in fact, I would say that the CEO, Channel 39, offered he sort of rounded down a bit and helped us to help us out, which I greatly appreciated, but it was still approximately $15,000 contribution that the other items listed that our kids could and maybe have participated in the past, none of us felt that those items were important enough for us to be handling that fee.
Okay, moving on to letter F. I'm sorry, letter E. Mr. Steckel and Ms. DeVitro, revisions on the
Mr. Vitro, let me-
2013-14.
I'll just take care of that
Oh,
one
is that next? I'm
quickly.
sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, and then we'll get into item F. In item E, we're going to propose a minor change to the district calendar due to the fact that after it was approved, we moved some of the Act 80 days, and what happened, we didn't have an equal number of days in between marking periods, so it's a minor change. Actually, it's a marking period move, and we're looking to move like quarter two from January 17th to January 22nd. We're moving quarter three from the 27th of March to the 28th of March. Minor modifications to the calendar, but we wanted to bring that to you for your approval at the next board meeting. Okay. Any questions?
Will that impact any of your conferences with parent-teacher or no?
It won't impact any of those parent-teacher conferences.
Okay.
Thank you.
Or Mr. Steckel, any PSSA or Keystone? It didn't look like it from,
It did not.
Okay,
Didn't
great.
impact any of those.
okay. Okay. Moving on to letter F, Ms. DeVitro has high school schedule update.
I do, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to present this evening our first update for the high school, actually, it's the flexible scheduling. It is our second year, as we all know. So I worked with Mr. Cuck and have been at the high school quite often, so I'm familiarizing myself with the schedule. But I did want to just give you an overview at this meeting and answer some detailed questions actually at the next board meeting. So I'm going to give you an overview of what our flexible schedule includes thus far. Flexible scheduling at the high school is allowing increased time for sustained learning. It allows our students the opportunity for community-based learning opportunities such as dual enrollment, diversified occupations, field trips, et cetera, and that does not impact on their class time because they have blocks of time that they can go out into the community. It has decreased both staff and student load. For example, a math teacher may only have to teach 3 sections instead of 6 all year at 78 minutes a section, a class, and obviously it decreases the the student load as well. Not as many classes throughout the day as compared to a traditional schedule. There's a reduced transition time for students in the hallway. There's not the constant 40-minute, the bell rings, another 40-minute, the bell rings. It's a lot less traffic in the hallway between time, a lot less transition time. And allows teachers more time to develop and implement project-based learning opportunities, which is a key for the Keystone tests, exams. A lot of synthesis and analysis is expected for the students to know on those exams. It mainly, a main reason I think it's important for the flexible scheduling is our increased opportunities for intervention and enrichment. And a lot of our students at this time, we find are in need of interventions. And I'll go through some schedules with you and explain how we're actually servicing our kids. Okay. Secondary response to intervention, instruction and intervention, RTII, that was a main focus in the secondary level. In fact, we have a K-12 at this point, and at the high school, this is our second year for RTII. Tier 1, just going to quickly review, all students should be receiving this curriculum in all of our courses. It's a standard aligned curriculum. Learning is focused on an increased depth of understanding, achievable in 78 minutes, and depth of knowledge and understanding is a key with our Common Core and our Keystone exams. And it's data-driven instructional practice. We look at data, tests, quizzes, Keystone exams, our study island benchmarks, et cetera, to adjust our curriculum. Okay, I wanted to give you an example, and again, I don't know all of the presentations that were provided to you, so I thought it would be a good overview to provide a student example of what a Tier 1 schedule would look like with a student not needing intervention. So our student would have, for 9th grade, Tier 1, Semester 1, Algebra 1, every day. If we go down to period 3 and 4, band is offered every day, all year. On an A day, and then Spanish 2 all year on a B day. And then they have Rover Block, directed study and Rover Block. This child can choose from a menu of things to do an enrichment with, if they're in AP enrichment, or Mr. Cook has a series of items that the children can actually choose from for enrichment. Lunch is 6 period every day. If we go to Semester 1, there's a study hall, A days, and skip down Semester 1 on B days as well. And then they have College Prep U.S. History, Semester 1, every day. And if you follow the schedule, Semester 2, they would have their English class, periods 1 and 2, every day. And I don't want to read through everything, but you can kind of follow that schedule. That would be a normal schedule Tier 1 student in 9th grade. Questions?
Mr. Vito, could you just explain to the board what this student might look like? I mean, in terms of his success or her success in the high school. Is it an average student? Is it a?
This would be a college prep student
College
that
prep.
actually passed, was proficient on the PSSA in math and reading.
Right.
And is, in college prep classes and on a, college
So
prep
an independent
course.
learner, somebody that's
Yes.
self-motivated.
Motivated.
Self-motivated.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And does very well in class and doesn't need extra time in tutorial, et cetera. Any other questions on that? Yes.
Lunch is a 40-minute session?
Lunch is 40 minutes, that
Okay.
is correct, one
Because
period a
the
day.
25 minutes is
Oh,
so
no,
hard for the
yeah.
kids to get through.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, they have a 40-minute lunch.
One of the things that, before we go too much further, that I just, again, try to interject very quickly
Sure.
is the safety issue. And either you or Mr. Cook could address that. The fact that you have students moving 4 times instead of 9. The impact on safety in the building.
Well, there's a lot less the focus on instructional time, obviously, Mr. Reinhardt is there. In addition to the focus on instructional time, or the loss of that, is the fact that there's less movement of 2,650 kids in the building, which then decreases your potential for issues. Majority of your issues at the high school level with 2,650 students in the building tends to take place in your large group areas, which happens to be the cafeteria and the hallways. So anytime you can reduce that, increases that safety. Anytime you'll know where the students are for 78 minutes, they have 5 minutes in between classes, you know where they are for the next 78 minutes. It's very difficult in a building that size to pinpoint the movements of students when every 40 minutes they're out in the hallway for 5 minutes. Every 40 minutes they're out in the hallway for 5 minutes. Duplicating that, it increases just the law of averages, it increases the potential for problems and also off-task behaviors because the students are constantly in motion, essentially.
That's the transition
Yeah,
time, a lot
I
less.
just wanted to say something about that. When I went down when I was at Northampton and went down to Hatboro Horsham, who was one of the leaders in block scheduling, they told me that their discipline and their number of fights and their discipline problems and so forth, why they were passing, going to a block scheduling dropped 60%.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. I mean, and I'm sure we're going to see that same drop.
And we
here
can look at
because-
that.
And,
Yeah, we can look at that data.
because you're not going to have them in the hall that much, and you take them out of the halls, and you're going to drop on problems, and that's going to free up the teachers and the principals to do other things than worry about the discipline.
Okay. I'd like to go to Tier 2, secondary, or RTII, what Tier 2 looks like. These students need some additional support. That's about 10 to 15% of our students in this area, Tier 2. Students are identified through various assessments as needing additional support. For example, students, they take the Study Island benchmark, the Keystone exams. If they are not proficient, and there's several benchmarking tests, I believe it's 4 throughout the year, the Keystone can be taken twice and they're not proficient, they are placed in an intervention. I'm gonna show you that next, on the next slide, what that looks like. The additional support takes place in the Rover block, and it does not interfere with other courses. We don't have to pull students from any other course, or they can't take a language or an art class because they need to have an intervention. This is set up that we can actually place them in an intervention and not interfere with major courses. The student progress is monitored to ensure we have the correct intervention and remediation. The data is looked at. The students, their information, their benchmarking, their assessments are constantly looked at with the teachers, Mr. Cuck, and there are data meetings, and we look at that to see if the students are being successful. Any questions on that? Okay. I wanted to show you what a Tier 2 ninth grade student schedule looks like. So this student would not have been proficient in the PSSA math and reading piece. So if you look at semester 1, they have Algebra 1 for one semester every day. Let's move down, they have band and Spanish. But if you move to semester 2, period 5, that is their Rover block. That's typically what where the Rover block would be, but now we are able to target those students that need this intervention and provide them the Keystone Algebra Test Prep course while they're receiving the Algebra 1 class. And that helps to prepare them for the winter Keystone. And hopefully they will get the supports they need while they're taking the algebra class and receiving the Algebra Test Prep class. And then by January, become successful and hopefully be proficient in the winter Keystone. If they are not, unfortunately, if they're not, they do have a second opportunity to take that test in the spring. Same with literature. This child was not proficient on the reading test for the PSSA. They're a ninth grade student, and they are placed second semester in the Keystone Literature Test Prep, as well as receiving semester 2, if you look at periods 1 and 2, their English class, their Lit Comp class. I want to focus on that area because that's huge for the flexible scheduling and what it allows us to do for kids in remediation and enrichment. Do you have questions on that? I don't want to read through every single piece of that schedule. So that's what we're doing. And I did the same because I thought you might want to see a 10th grade Tier 2 student. They are receiving geometry, but again, they were not proficient on the Keystone in algebra. So if you look down, they have semester 1 geometry every day for a semester. You look at period 6, they're going to take the Keystone Algebra Test Prep course, and hopefully they'll become proficient in that Algebra 1 winter Keystone exam. If not, they have a second opportunity in the spring. The same thing with the literature. Questions about that, Tier 2? No? Okay. And then finally, our Tier 3. This is intensive support for our students. This should be just about 5% of our students, a very small population. And this is used for a small number of students in need of intensive support. 9th grade, for example, these students in need of this intensive support are scheduled into a full year of math and English. These are very, basic or below basic kids that need a lot of support, and we are able to provide that with the flexible scheduling. This student would have an English class all year long, every day, all year, pre-algebra or algebra 1, again, all year. And they may have an intervention like Wilson Reading, which is an intensive intervention, and that's a whole other topic. But Wilson Reading is a very intense intervention for students with lower level reading abilities, and that's full year as well. 10th and 11th grade student supports are built into a student schedule as well. And the classes below are in addition to a student's core English and math. So not only are these children receiving English and math in their core, but they're also receiving Read 180. It's every day for 1 semester, which is a reading and intervention for Tier 3 students. Keystone Algebra 10 and 11 course. It's a semester every day course. And Wilson Reading, again, would be another example. So I wanted to show you what that would look like. So this is a Tier 3 9th grade student who is below basic or basic in English. They have all year, period 1, English, 9th grade English full year. And if you jump down to the bottom, 9th and 10th period, all year, pre-algebra, algebra 1. That's a full year as well, because they need that intensive support. Now, I took this schedule. If you look in the middle, period 5, this could be an ESL tutorial student. That child can actually still receive their ESL tutorial class, which is really, important for those students who are not proficient in the English language. So not only are they receiving intensive support, English all year, math all year, they're receiving their ESL tutorial. And again, this is only a sampling. There's many other schedules that we can look at too. I just wanted to give you an example of Tier 3 for 10th grade as well. This child obviously was below basic or basic on the Keystone in English as well as math. They're receiving English semester 1 as well as Read 180 semester 2. So they're getting their reading literature all year. Keystone Algebra Test Prep semester 1, that's their intervention, and they have geometry semester 1. And hopefully they will be proficient on the winter Keystone. If not, they have the spring Keystone to take the test again.
One of the
Yes.
things, if I could just, an observation that I made a while when we had this conversation about the high school schedule was I read the anxiety the board felt with the alternate schedule and kids missing blocks of time. And I think what this tries to clarify, and it does for me, it substantiates the fact that kids who are really struggling with math are getting more math in their day than
Yes.
they possibly have gotten in the past. Kids who are relatively independent in math are given more of a flexible schedule. And those who might not need to touch base every day are allowed to sort of spread their wings and do some other things, as long as they don't fall apart. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. And they could also double up on math and
They
take 2
could
math
double up on
courses a
math.
year.
Right.
And yeah.
So what I hope that this might do is to lower your anxiety somewhat regarding the fact that there might be a population of students who really are missing the intensive math and English instruction that they need, And this 5% plus the other group, which is what,
About
15?
10 to 15.
10 to 15%. I mean, their schedules are built to give them as much of that support as possible.
Right, that's correct. And they're still able to get band and choir in a
Right.
language which
Right.
wasn't always possible prior. This is an 11th grade Tier 3 student as well. Again, they have English and Read 180. That's all year they're receiving their language or English and reading course. And semester 1 Keystone Algebra Test Prep, obviously they did not score proficient or probably below basic on the Keystone test. And they also have Algebra 2 semester 1. So they have a double dose of math.
At the bottom there, where it says sports marketing
Yes.
and business
Yes.
and personal law, that is, on A day, they have sports marketing.
That's correct.
And on B day, they have business and personal law.
That is
And I
correct.
noticed quite a few students are taking business and personal law.
I believe that's a pretty popular course.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But that's what that means, so they have it every day, but on an A day,
day.
every day, and a B day.
Yes, that is correct. That's semester 2. Okay, our next steps, we will monitor the effectiveness of our RTII structure by looking closely at our data available and review the 2012-13 data to inform us of potential scheduling adjustments. So we need to look back at last year, look at this year, see if we need to adjust some things and ensure the needs of our students are being met by the current schedule. And if not, we need to adjust things. I do want to address some of the questions that came up at I think it was the July board meeting that was asked of me to inquire about. I'm working with Barry Cortez. He will be looking into these numbers for us and this information. But I was specifically asked, and please correct me if I misunderstood, if these aren't the questions that the board asked of me, how many students are taking advantage of the ability to take 2 math courses in a single year? He said he can extract that data. Increase or decrease in the number of students who failed math since the high school schedule changed from the traditional schedule to a flexible schedule. We can extract that data. And the number of students who are taking math for just 1 semester. Comparison of the 2011-12 SAT scores to the 2012-13 SAT scores. Now, if I missed anything, please let me know, but that is what I'm working on for the next scheduling update for those inquiries. If there's anything else you would like me to look into, please let me know. Yes.
I'd like to start off by saying thank you, of course, for
Oh, you're welcome.
compiling this information and bringing it back, put together so well.
Thank you.
Let me start off this comment by saying that I fully support the block scheduling system, and I think that it's a great system for our school. But at the same time, I'd like to know if any cons came up. We got the pros, but I'd like to know if any cons came up to our Rover block scheduling that we have.
Okay. Any ideas of what
Just
what you're
anything
thinking
that
of, or-
anything that may have been observed,
Okay.
maybe something that needs to be tweaked a little bit, something that needs to be talked about,
Okay.
and brought to whether it be our attention on the board or to the superintendent's attention. Just anything that may
Okay.
need to be reworked.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for that? Yes.
What happens to Tier 3 students, say, they go through English ninth grade? They're not proficient at the end of the year. What happens?
They have the opportunity to take the Keystone exam. Are you talking the Keystone exam, correct? No.
I'm talking about basic English at level proficiency. Because you show that the student moving then to English 10.
Correct.
English 11.
Yeah.
Are they moved
Right.
along, or is there a program that they actually demonstrate proficiency first?
Well, the course itself, they could pass the course maybe with, you're saying with a low or a low C, a low D, is that what you mean? But that's still passing. As far as the Keystone exam, they have to score proficient and they have to continue to be remediated, which they have time, because they're ninth grade, to become proficient. And I also know that with the Keystone exam, we have Mike, what is it, the alternate project? I can't think of it
The
all.
local educational
It's
agency.
Project-based assessment.
project-based assessment. If they cannot pass the Keystone exam, we could develop that. We are in the stages of looking at that. Probably for next year, we need to research that and see what that needs to look like. But they, yeah, potentially, could they not be a strong math or English or science student? Yes. But, you know, with this 9th grade, this year, they must pass those Keystone, the biology, the literacy, and the Algebra 1 exams in order to graduate. And that's important, and that's, you know, the interventions are important to.
They'll be streamed into interventions like the Read 180, Wilson Reading Program.
That's correct. Read Naturally, we have.
Tutoring,
Awards.
in high school tutoring, peer tutoring is a possibility. That's one of the things that we really need to, and I say we, talking about high schools all over the Commonwealth, what we have to do is sharpen the skills at developing and creating ways to get that population to demonstrate learning in a way that is different than the Keystone exam. Because there are students who are going through high schools now who just can't show
Yes.
proficiency in courses. And so the idea behind the idea behind all of this, and when you see that tier 2 and that tier level thing, the idea there is that Commonwealth is saying to us, you need to use your resources to get those kids on track so that by the time they reach 12th grade, that they're able to pass some type of assessment in a satisfactory manner, so they've earned a diploma.
Yeah, that's the project-based assessment.
And that's
what I
where the
was.
project-based
I couldn't think of the
assessment-
word, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
And if I may, one of the other things, this mirrors exactly what an elementary schedule looks like. It's basically blocks. Blocks of literacy or language arts, blocks of math. And also what we need to do with that particular student, and that's what you can do with a data team, you need to drill in and find out what could be the problem with that particular student that wasn't being successful in tier 3, and that's when you look at, well, maybe we need to do a further evaluation and find out if this student needs specialized instruction. So, I mean, that's what the data team is for, to really find out, and I hear the disconnect, because at times you have a student that seems to be passing the courses, but certainly doesn't pass that assessment.
Right.
And we need to determine what is that reason, and why is that not?
And obviously, yeah, if a student fails, they would have to repeat the course, and if we can offer it in summer school or the next year, you know, and that occurs, unfortunately, and sometimes they have to take 2 Englishes, semester 1, semester 2, in order to, you know, be up to speed to graduate on time. But yes, that does happen.
You know, we're grappling with the whole idea of a student being able to go through a high school, and this has happened many times. They go through the high school and they pass everything, they come to take a standardized test, and they
And they bomb it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
the question is, does that reflect, is that a reflection of, and that's where the standards come in, is that a reflection that we did a great job at teaching things that weren't important to the people who were wrote the test, or is the test and what's being tested on that particular day, are those things not deemed important by the staff in the building? And that's where that whole idea of the standards conversation comes in, because if we're not all on the same page, you know, some kids are going to be doomed. And
But, you know, how do you, I mean, I have had students in the past that have done almost straight A's and B's. And they took a PSEA or they took a particular test, they couldn't pass it.
Right.
They got very poor things, but
Right.
yet they were A and B students.
yes,
And
Yes,
they
that
weren't
happens
getting,
often.
they were having trouble getting into college because their
Yes.
SATs were 900, 1,000, and the college wanted, 1,200, and the student should have got it because they were mostly all A's. How do we address the student? I mean, there are some students that do, when it comes to a test, do freeze up.
well, my quick response is you address it by making sure that we make sure that what we're teaching in classrooms is reflected on what has been determined to be important on those tests.
And that's what we're working on. We
And
just
that's
had a
what we're
meeting
doing.
with our coordinators today, and we're looking at that curriculum in all classes.
No, I
to-
think
to
that's the
line it.
right
Yep,
answer.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
The choices are taken out of many of our courses and many of our subjects anymore. I think all of us in classrooms would agree that one of the sad things that's gone by the wayside is the opportunity for teachers to create and embellish and, because, we're really under time constraints.
And we talked about that at the
being
high school
accountable.
today, yes.
Yeah,
You can't
for-
just, I loved this area of history, because I was a history teacher, but I can't spend 2 or 3 weeks on it. I have
Right.
standards to cover now.
Right,
So, yeah,
right.
that goes away, so. Anything else?
Well, our intention is to stop by with this information as the year goes on, as we had mentioned before, so that we can bring you the data that Mr. Vitro mentioned and answer questions that might come up as time goes on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
you.
Vitro.
You're welcome. Okay.
Okay. Mr. Steckel.
Well, that standards-based intro was nicely done, Mr. Reinhardt. I greatly appreciate that. With reference to K to 4, if I could, and I'm gonna veer away from the 5-6. There's a brief piece that I was sent to you, and it was placed in maybe your electronic folder or maybe a paper folder. But it talks about the need for the standards-based curriculum. And we could sit here all evening and debate that. But the issue that I wanted to bring to your attention is there have been a group of people, K to 4, that have been working on making sure that we are aligned, our current curriculum is aligned with the state standards. If you recall, July of 2010, Board of Ed adopted the Common Core. And if you have a standards-based report card, your standards-based report card, which we do have K to 4, needs to be in alignment with those standards. So we are constantly tweaking our curriculum. The piece that I wanted to mention to you is that we have a group of people who have been meeting. We're in the process of looking at our K-1-2 report card. We're making minor modifications to it so that it's a little more parent-friendly, making sure it's in line with the state standards. There are a group of people have been doing that. We've been meeting during professional development time. Hopefully we'll have that completed shortly and make sure that we roll that out to the K-1-2 teachers. It does not change best pedagogy. That is research-based pedagogy is what we're using. That doesn't change anything. It's just making sure that our curriculum is aligned to the state standards. Again, we could debate that, but if that's what the standard is, that's the base report card that we have, and that's what we'll follow. So I did make a few comments in your briefing. And also, if I may, I just wanted to walk slowly into class size. It is something that's near and dear to our hearts. We do monitor it on a weekly basis. We take a look at grades, definitely K to 4, because we do have a policy, 126, that states that after 20 days, if a class is at 25 students, we need to monitor that and we need to take appropriate action if we see that it is causing lower assessment scores. So we do have a number of schools that have grade levels that are at 25. We do not exceed 29 in any of our elementary schools. In our lower middle school in 5-6, we do have class averages in homeroom, and basically the homeroom is what travels for math, English, reading, social studies, science. Our average is in the mid-20s. Our class size policy deals with elementary K to 4. So it is being monitored, and we are keeping tabs on it. I'm working with the elementary principals if they need to establish a team to study that, and we're looking at, we have assessment results that we can look at from years past and current. Do you have any question on the standards-based curriculum or class size that I could address? Yeah, Terry.
Yeah, would we be given an update regarding the results of your assessments as far as the principals and you going over class size and the effects of,
The way the policy is written, we do in fact, we do give that information and we pass that along to Mr. Castrovinci. And what we try to do, Carrie, so that it's basically, it has not been a board report that we've done in the past. We have done a pretty extensive report, and it does go to Mr. Castrovinci. Our best, what we've done in the schools is try and reallocate staffing like paraprofessionals to assist us in those high class size areas. I didn't answer your question. I guess I answered it by saying in the past we did not. And it is something we certainly
Would the
can.
board like that?
Get that to you.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, I mean, I noted how many classes in each of the buildings, the elementary buildings tended to have above 25, and at least one grade in every school. Some of the schools had two grades, one had 3 grades that were above. The majority of the students' classrooms were above 25. And I just would be concerned that we seem, because we have a consistency throughout the school buildings, to have larger class sizes right now in at least one grade, that maybe somewhere down the line this year, we could be given some kind of an assessment as to how we feel this is going with the larger class sizes, and if there's some remediation that should be done.
We have, and you're accurate, we do have a school that has 3 grade levels at 25 or higher. And the data that you have is the same data that I have. It can be done. I think one of the things we'll need to do, and we'll work on that, is determine what data we need to use in order to identify if this is an issue or not. Last year, I know at Tracy School, I'll call it feel-good data. We had data that really wasn't concrete, but it was yet, class size was so big that when I would be involved in an assessment, I was tripping over backpacks. But that's feel-good data.
Right.
There's hard data. We can look at DIBEL scores. We compare them from years prior. We tried to compare DIBEL scores based on if the class size was high when they were in first grade, what did the DIBEL scores look like in second? I think we'd have to really script exactly what data we want, because we would inundate you with the data.
Yeah.
Maybe what we could do is do something in January, mid-year.
I know that-
semesters.
Thank you, Mr. Reinhardt. What we do have to do is, based on the policy, we have a number of people, we're what day, I don't know, I don't count the days, but when you get to day 20, we have to institute the committee, and that committee has to begin to collect the data. The only data we'll have will be pre-data, it'll be all DIBELs, the first round of DIBELs, foresight. Really, we need to look at, January would be our second time of our data point, if the board's willing to wait that long.
Does that work? Would that be all right?
Yeah, I just think it would be important, since we have such a large number, I call it large number because I consider one grade in each of the schools, at least one grade, seems to be consistency.
That can be done. If you would permit me, I would like to make sure that I can place focus on that. In other words, this is the data we will need to look at, because if not, it would be too
Right.
extensive.
Yeah.
Okay?
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Snow. Okay. Were you finished?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. All right. Thank you both for very informative and well-developed presentations this evening. It appears as though we'll need to have some consensus on only letters D and E to move those two forward to full board, or not at this point. Any objections to moving those 2 items forward? D and E? Okay. All right, at this point, is there any public here this evening that would like to comment on anything on the academic committee agenda? Okay. No, seeing none? Okay, letters A, B, and C were not presented this evening. We have decided to move letters D and E forward to the full board for the September board meeting. Ms. DeVitra and Mr. Steckel did a fine job on their presentations to us, and that is it for the academic committee this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving policy?
We're going into policy, or did you want to sign this?
No, you're fine, your policy.
Okay. All right, so we will now move into the policy meeting. And as noted on our policy agenda, the first 2 agenda items will be passed on until the following month because Mrs. Amini is not present here tonight. So we will move into C, and that is the student expression policy number 220. And Mr. Thorne, do you want to jump in and?
Yeah, I could comment on these. As I think you're all aware, there was a case called KA versus Pocono Mountain School District that was recently decided by the Third Circuit. In that case, what happened was that an elementary school girl came in and wanted to distribute an invitation to a Christmas party at her church. The requirements at that time of Section 913 was that dissemination of materials by outside groups was to be reviewed by the superintendent. If it was something that, was not familiar to the teacher, if there's any questions that had to be reviewed. So essentially, the superintendent denied distribution on the basis that they didn't know anything about this. And there was, no ability to check out whether or not this was legitimate, whether or not it was a safe thing, or just what it was. The plaintiffs, or the child and her parents engaged a cause-based plaintiffs firm out of Georgia, which specializes in religious issues. The school district in no way looked at this as a religious issue, by the way, and in fact, the evidence was very sketchy that there was anything to do about religion other than the fact that the church was sponsoring this. In any event, there was they asked for a preliminary injunction. They received a preliminary injunction, and the matter was appealed. And it was appealed on the basis that the court had applied the standard in the so-called Tinker case. Now, all the educators know what the Tinker case is, but essentially that's kind of the seminal First Amendment student case where students in the late 1960s wore black armbands to school, and they were punished when they did not remove them, and the court held that students did in fact have a First Amendment right of expression, and that could only be curtailed by the school if there was a substantial disruption in the educational process. Finding none in the Tinker case, the students were victorious in that case. Now, in this particular case that went to KA, and it's a long-winded way, but it's important to understand what the issue was here. The school viewed this as a problem not of student expression, but of what's called forum analysis, which is basically the notion that if you have a public body, like school is the best example, but if you have a school district that allows a portion of its facilities to be used for public expression, like this facility right now. If you rent out your gym to the Boy Scouts or anything like that, and that becomes what's called an open forum or a limited open forum, where there's all kinds of special legal distinction. But the notion is that once you do that, you can't discriminate based on viewpoint. So if you allow the Lutherans to come and use your church, you have to allow the Methodists and so forth and so on. You probably also have to allow the John Birch Association to do it too. If unless there's some showing that there's going to be disruption. Okay, now that's a long-winded way of saying that what happened is that the court, despite our vigorous argument to the contrary, did not look at the outside community group as the group asking for the expression. And it said as long as there's a student that wants to distribute this material, it has to be looked at under Tinker. And in fact, we tried to change that up in Pocono to amend the policy to require the outside group to, basically apply to have their stuff distributed. And again, the idea here was just a matter of student safety, because the expression really was not occurring in the school. In any event, what the court did was ultimately they did two things. First of all, they found unconstitutional policy 913, as was written by the School Boards Association, to the extent that it applied to students. So that's one reason why we waited for all this time to see what was going on. And the other thing that they did that was kind of interesting is they took a long-standing law to the extent that the Tinker case would not be applied with the same degree of strictness in an elementary setting as it would in a secondary setting. And you can kind of see the logic in that, the notion being that, hey, there's some things in an elementary setting that, may be appropriate. They may not cause a disruption, but they may not simply be appropriate. And the court said, they just threw away that distinction, changed the law, and said there's no longer to be any difference in the application of Tinker in the elementary setting to Tinker in the secondary setting. Well, all that said, the decision was not to appeal that, so right now in the Third Circuit, that is the law, and in order to address that, we have now made some minor amendments to these policies to make it clear that students who are distributing and posting materials, asking that they be sent home, are allowed to do it absent any disruptions that it causes. And that the non-student 913 non-student organizations that are asking for things to be posted or things to be sent home, that applies only when those entities will themselves make a request, and those requests are not made by kids. That unfortunately, is the law in the Third Circuit. What continues to worry us as school lawyers and other administrators is, how easy this policy is to avoid by simply making kids of any age basically message mules that can be handed any kind of message to come in and insist that it be distributed. And unfortunately, that's what the law is. So these policies have been amended to reflect the current law, and we're recommending this not only here but in all our districts, because that's what the Third Circuit said we have to do. So bottom line is, if a student comes in, asks for a distribution of materials, assuming that there is any distribution to start with. Now, the way to get over this is not to distribute anything. In a couple districts that we've talked about it here, including this district as well, the notion of not sending anything home was unpalatable. So once you start sending things home, even when they're invitations to birthday parties and so forth, you're pretty much stuck with sending everything home. So again, these policies now are amended to reflect the current state of the law, and to separate the practices to be used when the request is made by an organization, as opposed to when the request for distribution is made to a student. And essentially, that's where we are. That's what the proposal is. And so when the student comes in, as long as there's no disruption, You cannot make a decision based upon the content of the message not to distribute it.
So in your discussion here, then, you were talking about both 220 and 913, correct?
Yeah, they pretty much go together in that sense, and actually, what the court essentially did was to say when a student is requesting the distribution of this material, 913 isn't the policy, it's 220 is the policy.
Right.
And of course, what we were saying is, when a student, particularly an elementary student, does not have any, is not actually communicating in school. See, that, in that case, it wasn't a communication for in school. It was a communication for out of school. It was a communication that was requested to be sent home,
Right.
not to be read at school. So the argument was Tinker can't possibly apply here because it's not a matter of student expression. It's merely a student as a conduit. And the court did not buy that. And so now when a student requests it, no matter whether it's first grade student or a 12th grade student, we have to look at it from the point of view of, is this going to cause a disruption? If it doesn't cause a disruption, then the student has a right under Policy 220 and under the First Amendment to have that material distributed in a non-discriminatory fashion.
So based on what you're saying, then, you're presenting 230 and 913.
220.
220 and 913 for us to present at our board meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions?
Would you consider the next step for us then is to develop what we're going to do, a procedure for dissemination of materials?
Well, I think that you have to, re-examine what is currently occurring. In the Pocono case, we tried to make a factual case, and in fact, there was testimony to the effect that in the elementary grades, the material that was sent home was not opened, and it was supposed to be delivered in a sealed envelope or folded over or something, so it wouldn't really be read at home. Court didn't seem to find that distinction important. Again, our argument was you can't apply Tinker because it's not a communication in school if nobody hears it. But the issue is, do your teachers allow for stuff to go home that are non-school related? This doesn't apply to school-related stuff, homework, that kind of stuff. But again, I don't want to pick on the Boy Scouts, but they're an example. They bring in a brochure. Can we pass them out? Would you take them home? Or this, that, the other thing, invitation, and so forth. Once you do that for one now, you're going to have to do it for everybody. So I think you should go back and examine your practices to the extent that feel that some of those practices could be tightened up or eliminated. You'll have a little bit more control. To the extent that you are allowing kids to carry home non-school related items, you're going to basically have now pretty much no control over the content of those.
So I guess the key takeaway I have, John, is that the modified versions of 220 and 913 are consistent with the constitutional rights within
As the
the
Third
students in
Circuit
the
sees it.
community as
As
the
the
most
third-
recent decision has determined.
As the highest federal court in this circuit sees it. Again, notwithstanding whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's the way the court has viewed it. And again, as educators, got to look back and see whether or not, is this enough of a concern that we need to scale back what we might be doing now in terms of allowing kids to carry home non-school related stuff and distribute them. Because once we do that, once we allow anything to go out, essentially everything goes out.
And what we struggle with here, and where I'm heading with a question about this is, is this a direction that should come from the board as to what we should do? Because really, communities often, especially the children in the community, often thrive on finding information out through school regarding all these activities and all these events. And all those things help to build community, and that's a good thing. So I guess in order for us to be able to come up with a process, what we need to know from the board is, where you stand in terms of, you want us to come up with a policy that at least until the first objectionable thing arrives at our doorstep, do we send it all home, or do we not send anything home and cut it all out?
Let me ask that.
Yes, sir.
Following up on that comment, if we started to send something home and then something objectionable comes up, it doesn't matter, that objectionable piece has to go.
Well, according to Third Circuit, unless it
Disruptive.
unless it creates a disruption. Now, there are a couple of other exceptions too. One is, if it's material that's lewd, obscene, or profane,
Right,
that can be filtered out.
right.
Or if it has to do with the promotion of drugs or alcohol, that can be filtered out. But pretty much everything else, unless it is disruptive to the educational process, goes home. So if somebody gets something from somebody's church they don't like, sounds like proselytizing, that.
But if you send
That
it
would
out,
be
you
annoying.
sent out a piece previously, then you're obligated to send that piece out.
Yes.
If you send out
That's-
pieces that, there's a picnic at this place or someplace else. Now, the one thing here that can be differentiated, however, are matters that are purely sports-based. Third Circuit and other cases have held that purely athletic matters don't have a speech content. And so, say if you have, local baseball and local soccer, things like that, that wouldn't cause a problem because it doesn't have an expressive element. So you can do that. But again, once you start sending out invitations to, a church or a synagogue, or, you come down and hear somebody talk about, there's a rally for, anti-teacher strike legislation or something like that. I mean, even if a first grader hands it up, according to the court now, it doesn't matter. It goes home.
John, I think we spoke before, where we would be able to hand out materials with outside groups that we partner with, right? And then groups that we don't partner with, educationally, we're allowed to say no. Is that no longer?
Well, not exactly, Frank. You can limit, actually, you can exclude from this materials that are directly school-related. But once you partner with anybody, and again, I don't want to pick on the Boy Scouts, but they're a common example. They are considered to have, by based on their creed, what they stand for, and so forth, represent a protected element of expression. They're also a good organization and do a lot of good things. But once you hand out their material, regardless of how you're partnered with them, then you can't come in and say, when somebody says, well, I'm now the coalition for, whatever. You have to hand out their materials as well, unless, again, they are obscene or something like that. They can obviously be stopped. Again, the difficulty in this, and the whole reason why the Pocono District appealed it, was the idea that kids would be message mules for outside organizations. And we're dealing with elementary kids. So, again, all you need to do to get around this is to hand this to some little kid and say, would you ask your teacher to have these distributed? And, under the Third Circuit decision, you could do that.
John,
I mean, yeah, yes, sir.
yeah, I have a question. If the teacher says, I have information here on my desk, the corner of my desk, concerning the Boy Scouts, or say that, anybody who wants it could take it. Is that distribution? Or do they physically have to hand it to each student?
Well, I mean, basically what you have to do is that, you'd have to allow, every other organization to do the same thing.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you say, I have information here, if you'd like to take it, you're welcome to.
You'd have to treat anybody else who wanted to distribute their material in the same way.
The same way, so technically the teacher doesn't physically have to hand it out. Because I know in homeroom, sometimes you don't have time to hand out pieces of literature.
Right. No, in other words, you have to treat everybody the same way once you
Okay.
start handing it out. But again, this was really an issue in this case in the elementary areas, and that's what the court changed.
Okay.
Because the standard had always been much more loosely applied and gave the administration and the principal and so forth more discretion to say, this isn't really appropriate to send out, or we don't know anything about this group, therefore, unless we know it's safe, unless we know who's running this, we're not going to allow it to be handed out. And that was the rationale of the superintendent. It's not that they was religious, it's that we don't even know who these people are. So we don't know where we're, and they felt that there was an obligation to do that. And the court said, no, you can't do that.
But for John's sake, like I said, if the teacher at home, like I say, homeroom's very limited time to pass out and stuff, especially if they have other stuff to pass out, school stuff or stuff concerning midterms and stuff of that nature. If the teacher says, I have other information here to pass out, it's on my desk here. Anybody who's interested in the Girl Scouts to be equal here, if you'd like to take it, you could take it. That's a form of passing it out. Right.
That creates basically a forum, and to the extent that you are allowing protected expression
Right.
to be facilitated by the public school in
Right.
that manner, and you have to let anybody else without viewpoint discrimination do that. So another
Right.
group that comes in, you gotta have 4 corners of your desk, maybe
Yeah,
you'll end
right.
up
No,
having
I
about 20
understand that.
corners.
But that still would be different than actually saying, here's the midterm exam schedule, and the teacher actually passes it out.
Well, that has to do with school. This
Yeah.
is
This is
only
non-school.
This is only non-school, community-based stuff. If I could just make a suggestion to the board, notwithstanding how frustrating it is sometimes to get the message of the need for the ability to maintain some kind of rules and controls in school, for the most part, people are of goodwill. But I think that rather than go around and, change all your policies expecting the worst, I think the thing to do is to expect that at some point, sometime, something's going to come in that's going to bother you, but may still be able to be distributed, or bother somebody. If a parent said, my kid brought this home and I think it's outrageous, you need to be prepared to deal with that. But otherwise, nobody gets a birthday invitation.
Madam Chairwoman, I have a question for our solicitor. What kind of liabilities does this open up to the school district? If we allow stuff to go out and then something happens to a child who participates in something and the parents want to include us in the lawsuit, are we liable, or?
I think that the parents would be hard-pressed to find a theory of liability against the district for that scenario. We now have more liability if we don't allow that kind of distribution. And, again, I think, that the court is unfortunately not looking at what at least the administration in the Pocono case felt was a legitimate function of the principal and the superintendent, which is to have some assuredness that what was being handed out when kids were being invited to attend had some degree of safety and respectability and, wholesomeness attached to it. And, unfortunately, the court didn't say that. The court looked at that and said, hey, we've got these tests. That's not a legitimate concern for you. The only concern here is, does it cause a disruption in the school? And if it doesn't, then you have to distribute that if you distribute anything.
Thank you.
So what we do in the classrooms, we set up a little travel stand like you get on going through a booth, and we say, here's all the travel information you need, and if you want it, take it.
That might be a possibility.
Yeah, I'm just.
That
I'm
might
just
be a
saying.
possibility, and say, if you want to distribute, if you want to take something home, here it is.
Yeah, here's-
But see, again, the problem is more pronounced in the elementary schools,
Yes,
where kids will be handed stuff in a bag to take
Right.
stuff home. And also, again, as the school felt it had a greater parental obligation to ensure that what was going out had some degree of trustworthiness. So,
So as it stands, then we will present these two policies to the full board next Tuesday, correct? Okay.
Yes.
If anyone else has any objections or anything, speak now. No. Okay, we'll move forward on that. The last policy to be discussed tonight is policy 101, philosophy of education. Did everyone have a chance to read that? And are there any questions regarding that, or would you like me to read what the addition is, or the change? The change would be, East Area School District will develop its students into responsible citizens and lifelong learners by providing academically challenging 21st century curriculum and safe school environment, period. And they're deleting the former mission statement. Any questions?
Since we're talking about education, is it really necessary to add on and a safe school environment, or should it just end with curriculum? I mean, that's the point of why we're here.
You're saying to take out the safe school environment?
Right.
You mean that being an assumption?
Yeah, I mean, our whole thing is about the academics and the curriculum. It's not, wherever you go, whenever you're out in public or you're any place, that's always, you're right, it's the assumption that it would be a safe area. You have to, should we be stating what should be the obvious?
Well, I think it has been obvious in an assumption. I don't think it is anymore as of late. Schools are unfortunately no longer the safe place, as we've seen in the news every day. So even, kids in our area being approached, possibly abducted. So I think it's good to reinforce it, as to say that, we're going to do what we have to do to provide a safe school environment. I would like to keep it in.
Any other thoughts?
If you do keep it in, you might want to change "and" to "in."
Yeah, maybe you do it the other way around. Eastern Area School District in a safe school environment or in a safe environment will develop its students into responsible citizens. This typically is something where you put a committee together to do this.
Well, I think that it was put together by people who were working with the accreditation process, is that correct?
That's correct.
right. This is like
So
the
it
third
was
year
a committee
review.
It was a
that
committee.
had worked on this.
This is a third
Were the
year
board members
review, I
there?
think, of the.
Do you
I was
recall?
not in
You weren't,
charge of the committee.
Just, this came up once
I
before.
wasn't on the
You
committee.
were not.
No, I wasn't,
This
unfortunately. It
this
was
came up
recent,
actually once
but-
before and said that a committee should be put together and to walk through some of these things.
Yeah.
And it never occurred.
I can't recall if there was a board member present.
It would have been, Pat Fisher would have been the only other board member that was involved in some of those other, and she's obviously not on the board any longer. And the committees continued even though they didn't have her or my, I wasn't on all the
Certainly can do
committees,
that.
so I wasn't on that one specifically working on the mission statement. So I don't know who to refer back to, but it was a process.
If this was process, I was on some of the committees, but not this one, but this was sent to a committee.
Yes,
Okay.
it was a result of a
A
committee.
committee, and so I think, I think we upheld that part, and it's a review of our middle state's evaluation that we have to go through periodically.
Right, and it was a revision in the mission
Right.
statement to update it and change it somewhat on the terminology. So, do people want to look at this further? Do we want to present it to the full board for a vote? Which direction do we want to go?
This is Allison. I have a question for you. I don't have an objection to it at all, but I have a problem moving it to the full board unless we know exactly where it came from. This is our district mission statement, and nobody seems to know exactly who wrote it or where it came
I don't think
from.
anyone's in the room right now that's involved with the,
The only thing I can recollect is the Excellence by Design committees.
right,
Right?
It was.
And then it was, actually, it's just high school now, but I don't want to say it came from that high school committee.
The High School Excellence by Design Committee, as a part of the larger process, Carrie, you're very familiar with the AFG process. Excellence by Design became a individualized high school process, and so our committee did take a look at the statement, but that would be for the high school. We kept it in alignment with what the district had. We might have changed it, but that wasn't necessarily recommended to the board to change for the district because it wasn't a district level committee, it was only a high school group, so
Did
I
it look
think.
like this?
I-
Did it look like this?
I'm gonna have to look at it, I don't, and you're really
Because
putting me
they
on the
came
spot
before
here to
the
recall
board, I'm
exactly.
sorry, I,
No,
That's
just
okay,
wondering
no,
why
I'm just,
someone who's on the
I don't
committee.
know who, can I ask, Janet was on the right page, put it on the agenda.
It was a holdover.
Oh, it's supposed to be on here, okay. I got
Yeah,
it.
it was a
Yeah.
holdover.
Sorry, Carrie, I didn't know how this popped up on the
Would you like us just to pull it and then we'll try to determine
I think maybe if we
its
could
source?
research the Excellence by
Yes.
Design committee that happened.
Then we'll know who was part of the
Because if it was.
committee.
Right, and
Yes.
if it was in fact a secondary
Yeah.
committee, then it
That's
doesn't
fine. Yeah,
perhaps
we'll do
belong
that.
on the
We'll just
entire-
pull it and take a look at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have to
Yeah.
realize that
I don't mean to put
ramifications.
anyone on the spot, but I think
No,
we're
no, no,
all
no.
kind of.
I just didn't know where it came from, because if it came from our committee, I would have been more prepared to discuss that with the board in terms of our
I
recommendation.
just know it came from the accreditation, which is now Excellence by
It did.
Design,
Right,
and it
yes.
came from
Yes.
that, one of those committees within that process,
That's
okay.
what I'm aware of too.
And we all, as we were looking at this, the other thing we have to be aware of is the financial impact of making this change for all the plaques and everything that are in all the buildings,
Yes, every
all the
building.
various classrooms or wherever they're located throughout the entire district.
Right, so identifying what this was intended for, who wrote it, and then
That's
move forward
probably
and
very
come back
important. That's
to the
great.
table at a committee meeting. Okay, all right, that's fine, so we will hold that over until we get further information.
Right.
And that's it for agenda items. Is there anyone in the public that would like to pass some comments? Whichever one wants to go first.
Two short observations, if I may. One on an item you pulled. But before you write policy statements that are difficult to uphold and measure, I think you need to be very careful, because if you write safe schools, it sounds good, it's a great objective, but I can see a plaintiff's attorney taking you to task if his kid gets beat up. After all, at the very top, you said safety, and you didn't expend enough money along the way to guarantee it. Think things through backwards as to the problems you're creating by promising nirvana. It's nice, but it's expensive to deliver, and maybe impossible to deliver with the other goals of education that you have before you. We all like safety, but we can't promise it. And that's where I get goosey. On the policy as to the age of admissions, I don't know who wrote it back when, and I'm not criticizing the person that reviewed it, but the person who wrote it way back when flunked English. Because in one sentence it talks about beginners, then it talks about transplants, then it talks about those who are out of state, then it talks about in-state, and is consistently inconsistent. That's not the problem, okay? But I would suggest you clean it up. The problem, and I suggest to you to pass it and clean it up, is not that you have a problem of a small group of aggressive parents who occasionally want to get a kid in early, and I don't fault them for that. On the flip side of the problem, Mr. Simonetta has a problem, and that is we have increasing numbers of charter schools and cyber charter schools who want to back into the daycare business and send you the bill. And by law, a charter school can admit down to age 4 and send you the bill. Now, if you establish age 5 rigidly, which your policy change addresses, then you can say to them, you can admit them all day long, but Mr. Simonetta says, I don't need to send you the money until you do it at age 5. So you cut out the creative games at age 4. And the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania weighed in on that decision in Slippery Rock and said, in a unanimous decision, age 5 counts. You don't have to send the money to them. So I think it's important from a financial standpoint that you not open up the back door to those who want to be creative at your expense. I don't fault parents for trying to advance children. I have a problem with the charter schools sucking you dry through many, many bleeding holes. And this is one of those little bleeding holes that you need to help Mr. Simonetta. And a policy that says age 5.000 is easy. Your old policy that allowed for this, that, and the other thing allowed the charter school to say, well, he's a bright little kid at 4, here's the bill. And that's not Mr. Simonetta's job. He's got plenty of work to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That, by the way, will be further discussed when Mrs. Amelia is back.
I urge you to pass it sooner rather than later to make Mr. Simonetta's job cleaner rather than fuzzier.
Hi, I'm John Kennedy. On the question of sending material home, I don't think, in my personal opinion, anything should go home that's not school material unless it clearly says on the material that it's not school material.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Thank you very much for speaking up. And I think that concludes the policy committee. We will bring forth C and D, which is policies 220 and 913, and put them on the agenda. And policy 101 will be researched more before we bring it back to the committee. And then the first two, A and B, will be discussed. Policy 113 and 201 will be discussed at the next committee meeting.
Madam Chairman, is it fair for me to gain the consensus from the board then that you would like us to come up with some type of requirement for people to send things home, which would include, I think, the suggestion made about the disclaimer, and also the count list, for example, if somebody wants to send something home, they've got to pre-count the allotment of papers for the classrooms and so forth. Do I get that as consensus that until we end up with something that we find totally, until someone makes a determination that something does not necessarily fit well with the district's, it's very difficult to talk about that, isn't it?
Policy procedures are written down.
Until there's an objection by an administrator, we'll just continue to try to forward things home and hope that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, but
How's that?
If you send one piece home today,
Right,
that means everything tomorrow goes home.
that's correct.
That means there's no stopping anything down the road.
Well, there is if it doesn't,
has to
there is,
conform to our
it has to conform to this notion of
That's not disruptive.
prohibited, yes, and prohibited material, which is, once again, we're back in that whole realm of opinion. What is libelous, obscene, lewd, vulgar, and profane, but,
There's a lot of things that don't fall into that category, but
Yes.
that are objectionable.
that's true.
And I think that's where you have to go first, because if you send something, the only thing that seems to be clean that you can send home is stuff on athletics. So when you're looking at the little leagues that we have in the community, probably like POW,
Okay.
and things like that, that are, at least that would be my take on what was just said this evening. Those are all clean and can go home. But the minute, if a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout comes in and you send that home, that just opened the door. There's no shut, once the cow left the barn, there's no shutting the
But
door.
how do you say no to the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts with our giving policies?
But right now, that comes back either to us, and that's, I think, the question. Do I
Yeah.
bring that back to the board, and I'm gonna ask the board for it, because again, once the board opens that door too, it doesn't matter who opens it.
Because we've already had this door opened and we've never finalized how we will resolve
Right.
it. Boy Scouts is still, it is the organization right now that had been at our door knocking.
Right.
There's also an extension to this, and I don't want to belabor the point, but there's an extension to this where groups have asked if they could set up a table inside an event in some of our schools, and so there's perhaps an element of selection that goes on with that as well, which is going to have to stop. I mean, that privilege is going to have to come to an end. With the exception of the CIT, I would think, the community college, those that we support, like you were mentioning, school-related groups, athletics,
Public library.
the
public library would be another one.
When you say athletics, you mean the community center, setting up tables?
I think that's what you're referring to, right? Yeah.
Right.
That a flyer from the community.
Are we still talking about tables?
Well, I
inside?
think we're talking about all of it, because it sort of all fits under that one umbrella as to what we're going to do and not do. And we don't want to offend people in the community whose notions are noble. They want to do good things, and the problem is that when the district's door closes, the message is sent, it's a negative message to those people who are trying to do good things for kids. And we're kind of caught in the crossfire, those of us who run in schools, so, and the board will be caught in the crossfire as well.
So where do you want to go with this at this point? And what would you feel comfortable?
Well, I would say to you, in a past life, as long as I've seen the documents and initialed them, they went out, and that went on for years, and quite honestly, I don't know that I ever found anything that I felt would, that a board or the community would find objectionable or anything like that. But, I tend to lean on that, in that direction, because, once again, I'm thinking about the significance of those activities to the health of a community and the health of kids. Many kids, who might live, on 9th Street might not know that there's a free program at the Sigel Museum on something that would be really important and interesting to them, unless it goes home sometimes through school. And so I'm thinking, I wouldn't want to deny the kids that privilege of connecting to it. And as soon as something comes through that looks like it would fit broadly into some of these categories, I'd flag it, and if somebody objects to it, they'll be coming here. They'll probably come to the board and say, I want this sent home. And that's when maybe we'd have to take a look at the policy and and define it more specifically. Now, that's taking the chance, but
Another thing you could do, Mr. Reinhardt, is look at more cyber-based methods of getting that material.
Yeah, that's true too.
That would give perhaps parents an additional element of control over it.
Yeah.
They see on some states, it's not good. Again, the big change here is that it has to do with when the student requests, and the elementary student particularly, requests that something be sent home, in the nature of an invitation or something like that. And that's what opened the door, particularly in this case.
So again, I just need to ask for clarification. NCLB has a clause in it that states that that everything goes home. And are we now saying that that this ruling does not fly or does not change that requirement at all? Yes, it does, yeah.
Everything goes home.
Believe it or not, yes.
Everything goes home.
Everything that is distributed, that's brought in to distribute. You can't discriminate. There's phraseology, there's a section of NCLB that addresses that, and it was brought to my attention by a local minister. So,
But it's the same notion, as I said, if you're gonna allow kids to carry home stuff that's not directly school related, as this gentleman pointed out, then you're not gonna be able to censor those based on anything but, is it disruptive, which is gonna be hard to be because you can take it home, or is it lewd, or is it removed from your alcohol?
so invitations, birthday parties, and that are out.
Well, they're out if you want to try to maintain a little bit more control. You send everything, if you continue to send that stuff home, then everything's gonna go home unless it's one of those categories. It's,
Right.
it's lewd or it's inappropriate.
This is where we have fallen on both sides of the fence.
Yes.
With this
Yeah.
policy, and that's why this policy continues to be a whole
It's-
wave report, but
Yeah.
I think the court was just an outside entity. We have internal turmoils as to.
Yeah, it is. It's troublesome, and it's because it's troublesome for us at the for you. It's troublesome, and for us at the building levels to. All right. How about if we'll talk about this some more, and we'll see if we can come up with a suggested path.
Mrs.
of,
Ellison?
What's that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Paul, go
a
ahead.
comment or a suggestion. This has been, I think, before this board for at least 2 years.
Yes, yes.
Easy.
And when we've debated this, we've arrived at the same point each and every time. We were waiting for the court ruling. Court ruling has arrived. Therefore, I would believe that it would be prudent that we do trust that 95+% of the things that will go home will benefit our children. And the other thing is that we live in an information age in which students, families, the community is inundated with information electronically and through the mail. This will be no different. Electronically, you have a delete key. At home, you have a trash can. I think we ought to put our confidence in the people
Yes.
to exercise that.
Well stated. Okay, so we will go forward if.
And moving forward.
Move forward.
Move forward, okay, and
Move
we'll
forward.
present those at the next board meeting. And that concludes this part of the committee's meeting.
We're going to move into finance. And Mike, you have some introductions you want to do?
I do. We're at that time of the year that we've seen for the last 2 or 3 years, where opportunity knocks. And Mr. Brad Redding and Mr. Ken Phillips are from PFM, our financial management company, are going to present some information in reference to refinancing our bonds, or a portion thereof. Again, the difference this year is the market and how it has, the rates have increased over a period of time. So we're going to be presenting a couple of different options, and with, at the end, a recommendation for one.
Great.
Turn it over to.
Great, thank you, Mr. Simonetta. Brad's going to pass out, well, I think you have the presentations as well. Does everyone have a copy, or do we have some extra here? We've been very fortunate since the end of 2011, when we started to institute the financing plan for refinancing 2005, 2006 bonds. We've saved $4.25 million in 3 issues over the last 3 years. This financing goes back to the large financing for the middle school project. And it was very creative at that time because we issued the debt with what were called premium bonds at like 7.5%, realizing that, one, it got around smacked one stuff that we had to be concerned about, but also gave us the opportunity going forward to hopefully, in a normal market, have some refinancing opportunities. The last 3 issues have been done at a very not normal market because rates have been so low. Some of the slides we're going to take a look at today is we've seen a significant increase in rates since May, and so we have some ideas that we're going to talk about. Last year when we were here talking about this, Brad and I said we're going to be back. We may talk about doing another phase of a $10 million issue just like we did the last 3, but depending where the market is, we're going to have further discussion as to what we should do. And so, as Mr. Simonetta has stated, we've spent considerable time with him over the last couple weeks going through various different options leading up to tonight's presentation. So the first page that's just a snapshot of where you are. Okay? That's the debt service as the district currently has. And you can take a look at footnotes 7, 8, and 9, which reflect the 2011, 12, 13 bonds, and you can see that rates are just really, really low. Okay? We're going to take a look at page 2, which represents the net debt service, meaning that's the debt service after state reimbursement. The state assists the district in making payments because you went through the PlanCom process. So you can see on the far right-hand side, we're in that $13 million, $13.1 million range. That's the net local effort, if you will, based after state reimbursement. Next page just deals with the outstanding principal. After this year, the district has about $120 to $123 million of just principal debt outstanding. The good thing in looking at that is it's relatively short. You know, when you really consider, you know, a 20-year mortgage on a home, a 30-year mortgage on a home, the debt is pretty much done in 2028. So we're talking within 15 years. And a good portion of it gets done probably over the next 7, 8 to 9 years. The next page represents the last 3 refundings, and we'll go to them in order. The green line represents the issue done November of 11. 1.133 million was the savings. The blue line then represents the deal that was done at the beginning of 2012. It was settled in 2012.
Theirs is not in color.
You know what you want to test?
Yeah, sure.
If you want to just look up the
We
screen.
all have black lines, so.
That's,
It's up on the screen, the color.
yeah,
I'll give you colors.
Yeah.
You know why not?
we have it. We have them, we made them.
These might wind up in the trash cans if we don't.
When you take a look at the screen, so I can just keep on speaking to be succinct with you with respect to your time. The green line was the very first issue, that was the 11, that was 1.133 million in savings. We then had the blue line, which was the 2012, which represented $1.3 million of savings. And then this last issue, done at the very beginning of this past year, 2013, $1.8 million of savings. And you can see on that yellow line, even though rates were so good in 11 and 12, how far rates had come down to basically 60-year lows. So really, those last 3 issues represent a little over $4.25 million of savings. The, what is that, purple, magenta, whatever that, you know, proper color is, represents where the market is today. Okay? So we've seen a pretty big increase with respect to what's happened, which is reflected on the next page. 60-year lows was Thanksgiving of 2012. 60 years. the bond market, when you look at the little gray box below that, has increased 176 basis points. That's 1.75%. And most of that has occurred from mid-May through where we are today. Everyone reads the news, hears the news about the tapering, okay? The tapering, where the Fed's going to taper their purchases of U.S. Treasury securities. And so what has happened is that the fear in the market is inflationary fears, higher interest rates, and so on. So we have seen a significant increase, and you know, so that brings us to where we are today. We still have some refunding opportunities. The question is, what do we do? All right? Which then brings us, what Brad and I put together and spent a lot of time with Mike on was pages 6 and 7. And these are the same type of studies that we've shared with you over the last 3 years. When you look at page 6, the top half of the page is what is if we refund all the debt at one time. And so we're going to stay with the dates of 1/15/2014. You see several dates there. These bonds aren't callable till April 1 of 16, so we can't really take them out of the market. We can do a refunding just like we did the last 3 years, but officially they don't get called until 2016. In a perfect world, if rates stayed exactly where they are today, we have under 1/15/14, 1,607,811 is if we refund the deal today, refund the 05 bonds. But if rates stayed the same, if we knew they were going to stay the same, we could wait to April 1 of 16 and save $3.6 million. The problem is we've really enjoyed a pretty good opportunity the last couple of years. Well, we've seen just what's happened since May. Okay, so the question really becomes, what do we do with respect to refunding the 05 bonds? And when you go to the next page, the 06 bonds as well. Okay? So after looking at many different recommendations or many different options, not recommendations, after we've looked at many different options, and Mike and Brad and I have talked and spent time on it, we basically tonight think that there's probably 2 options that we should probably consider. One would be to refund everything right now. If rates continue to go higher, we'll continue to lose some money. We're never going to achieve what's on that page. So we go ahead and if rates, when we do the refunding or where they are today, you'd save the $1.6 million. And if you go to the next page, or go to page 7 on your handout, $2,069,000. You see that number up there under January of 14? So if rates stay the same here for the next 60 days or so until we can implement something, you would save about $3.7 million by doing everything. Okay? The other option, staying on that page 7, would be to only take a look at refunding the 2006 bonds. Again, looking at the top half of that. So you'd be at a little over $2 million of savings. So option 1 is you do it all. Option 2 is you'd only do the 06s and then continue the study of what we do with the 05s. That we would study with Mr. Simonetta and, you know, perhaps, you know, 1 or 2 of you over the next 60, 90 days to see what are our options, what is going to happen over the next, you know, 3, 4, 5 months with respect to rates. So the second option is really sort of a hedge, realizing no one can predict rates. We've been pretty lucky here the last couple of years in the financial plan that was put together, sort of saying, okay, maybe we take some of it off the table like the 06s, but maybe we continue to study the 05s and see if we can achieve a little more than the 1.7. Okay? So that really will open up for any type of questions. It's been a great financial plan. You've saved over $4.25 million already. Unless something catastrophic happens, which seems to have happened since May, it looks like we're going to save another couple $1 million. And we'd spread that out over the life, just like we did the last couple, you know. So we're going to lower. When you go back to page 1 or 2, we're going to take your annual debt service and we're going to, you know, bring that lower. Okay? So, you know, depending how much we save, we're going to spread it out over the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years and just bring your overall debt down lower, which is what we've done the last couple of years as well. Which has been
I just wanted to expand on that, just when you hear $4.2 million savings, and we've talked about this, that we did spread it out, so yeah, we'll save, $1 million this year, but then we're gonna have to come up with another $500,000 next year. So in all three refis, we spread it out, so not any one budget year are we gonna have to be looking to make up the difference. I do agree.
So with that, we'll open up to any questions. We'll go through recommended action as to what maybe we've talked about. But I don't think, whatever decision is made, I don't think you can be criticized. The financial plan that was implemented at the late 2011 has worked extremely well. No one could predict what has happened, since May of 2013, and there's nothing we can do about it anyway. Okay? So, Brett, anything to add?
Yeah, the only comment I wanted to add is that when we do the refinancing, we're not going to extend the payments on the bond, we're going to pay it off in the same time, we're just going to reduce the rate. I just thought that was important for the board to know that there's not going to be an extension of it to create the savings. You're going to pay it off in due course, you're just going to reduce your interest rate.
I think it's also important to note, different from the last three, this will give us an opportunity to do 2 refis in one fiscal year. We're just spreading it out to where maybe we can realize a little more, hoping that those rates will go down in the next few months.
We have spent time with Mr. Freund's partner, Mr. Reed. We've already achieved the legal opinions that are appropriate depending on what action you want to take if we want to do something the balance of this year. So, we're okay from a legal standpoint.
So basically, the approval that we would give you next week would be, as you're watching the market, to strike when it's the appropriate time and everything.
And the other thing, Mr. Fennel, would be, do we do option 1, do it all, and just put it to bed and forget about it, and you'll never see us again? That's not true. Or do we do option 2, which is to maybe only do the last page, which the 2006 bonds, and then continue discussion on some options for the 2005. That's where we are.
So those are the 2 pieces you need approval for.
Yeah, we already have all the legal documents approved from the way back in 2011, and so really it just is what is the board's decision as to which way you want to go. Yes, sir?
Isn't there a philosophy that if the stock market keeps on going up the way it has, and it goes up and down, but it's been plateauing on a higher level. Okay, doesn't that affect the bond market? Doesn't that necessarily, there's a philosophy that says if stocks go up, bonds go down?
I think in the day, yes, but not today. Okay? The U.S. Federal Reserve has been subsidizing the market to the tune of $85 billion a month by purchasing Treasury securities, shoring up the housing market and the construction market. Okay? They are going to taper away from doing that. That is what has caused the spike beginning in May when the Fed chairman testified before Congress, which he does every month. The markets just went, wait a minute. So we're not going to enjoy these great rates we've had for the last 5 years. You're now going to stop supporting us, take away our subsidies, if you will, and therefore rates are going back to probably where they should be because of that. And so I don't disagree with you, okay? You're absolutely correct in your observation. But I think we're taking the supports from the market out, and that's what's caused the rise in rates.
But the housing market, even with those supports being taken out, the housing market's slowly going up.
Oh, no, yeah.
Nationwide.
Yeah. No, which then drives higher rates as well.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
So as the housing market goes up, the rates do go up.
Yeah.
They're, I think, really on a house right now, I think they're in the 5% range.
I'm not sure where the mortgage market is.
Right, the mortgage market is around 5%, give or take a few points.
That's why the recommendation now is, as we said months ago, we'll take a look at doing another 10 million. Maybe we'll get a chance to do another bite of just doing 10 million, and then the balance like in 15, but I think the market's told us we can't do that. I think it makes sense to either do it all, or to go ahead and do part of it, and continue study on the 05s and sort of hedge our bets.
Yeah, my opinion, I do follow the market quite, how would I say, quite intensively. That I think we should do part of it. To hedge our bet is we do the 06, leave the rest alone, and what we're doing is, in a sense, hedging our bet. We're saying that we'll take the we'll take the money we're gonna make on the '06, but we're gonna have the reserve of what's left. And we're still gonna save money each way.
If we do option 2, or we'll call that option 2,
Okay.
then I would say within the balance of the fall, we'd be meeting with the administration in terms of making the determination of what we do on the next one, which would probably happen sometime the first quarter of 14.
Yes,
Okay.
I would think so, yeah.
Regarding the two options, Mr. Simonetta said we can hope that the rates come down, and you made the comment about when the Fed chair speaks. As soon as before he gets back on his plane, the market's either up or down. I know you guys don't hope. I know you have people that study and speculate out. What is your recommendation? Not 2, but 1. What would be your option?
I think the decision we came with today was to sort of hedge our bets.
Like what I said.
Yeah, sort of hedge our bets and do option 2. Okay? Realizing that we may kick ourselves come January and say, we should have done it all. But at least we're giving the opportunity to look at some other things that we've had some private discussion with Mr. Simonetta on, and just want further discussion and analysis of some of those options.
And with option 2, we can kick ourselves and say we should have done it all, or we can kick ourselves and say, or we can say at least we did something.
Yeah. And let's not lose sight of what has happened the last, since the end of 2011. $4.25 million of savings is significant. We've lowered the debt service. If you go back a snapshot 2.5 years ago, where the debt service was, and we're going to have the opportunity to save a couple million more. The question is, how much is the couple million? Is it 2? Is it 4? Is it 1? What is the number? So we think that's our suggestion, to take half of it off the table. Well, it's really not even half. It's maybe 40% of it off the table by doing the 06s, and then have study and a decision by probably Thanksgiving as to what we're going to do with the other piece, and that'll come with further discussions.
Thank you.
But hedging our bet is the safest way to go, I think, at this point in time.
And Mike, you're on that same page.
Yeah, we extensive discussions even this morning, finishing up and really analyzing it. I think we did. I think we did well, as they said, the last few years, and I don't think even spreading it out, I think it's worth taking that opportunity. We're not going to lose that much if the rates do change a little bit in that short time. So I think
Now, Mike said that, we didn't say that. Okay, just want to make sure that's.
I wasn't supposed to say that.
But we know Mike's a busy guy, and we appreciate his time on this, because he really spent a lot of time. And when we pick up the phone and call Debbie and say, hey, and Debbie says, hey, Mike, there's a chance to save money, he usually picks up the phone pretty quickly.
Very good.
So we appreciate his time on this.
Okay, any other questions by the board? So at this point, the recommendation next week on the agenda would be for option 2, and letting them move accordingly.
Great, thank you very much for your time.
Is there
Thank
anybody in
you.
the public that would like to address any items on the finance agenda? No hands, we move on to buildings and grounds.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. All right, buildings and grounds. Our letter A, we're going to hear from Mr. Simonetta and BOE Engineering regarding our district security and entrance renovation presentation.
As you know, last May, we presented, I guess, the first run-through of the vestibule renovations, and there were some questions. Over the summer, we went through the buildings again. Josh Bryce from BOE Engineering met with the administrators. A couple board members were there during our walkthroughs in the summer, and we looked at every entranceway again. I think there were only a couple that we changed from the first presentation. Cheston was one. Palmer was another one. And I'm not sure, I think there was a third. But anyway, Josh is going to run through quickly what the design will look like, what we're looking for. The game plan is to, obviously we missed the bidding opportunity for the summer projects. This project needs to be done over the summer, so we can get it done, get it in. Now, that delay, if you recall, in the previous bid, not doing it, not bidding it in the spring and waiting till the fall to bid it or to the early winter, we realized a lot of savings in the Paxinosa job and in the high school roofing job, because we got on the bidding train, if you will, early on, so the contractors were locked in, they're more aggressive with their pricing if the bids go out earlier. So what we're looking for tonight is just the option to move forward, to finalize these plans with building administration, and the concept to go out for bids or RFPs in the late winter, so we can award in the spring if we choose to do so. This is not locking us into anything except for Dewey to finalize the plans for the administration. Before you do that, in addition to what we're also doing in the security end, we're investigating the opportunity that we talked about last year about posting for anticipated school resource officers for the elementary buildings. We are working with the administration on consolidating and basically taking all the radios, making sure everybody has what they need, and making it under one vendor. We're in the process of doing that. And part of this will also be the district-wide building access, the swipe cards for the entire staff in all the buildings. With that, I'll turn it over to the building pictures.
Thank you, Mr. Simonetta. Before I begin, I just wanted to touch a little bit on what Mr. Simonetta had said about the bidding time frame. It's advantageous not strictly from a bidding time frame and better pricing, but also the amount of disruption that we're going to be causing with the secured vestibules right at kind of the heart, the front of the building, is going to be somewhat significant. So under the original time frame that we had discussed back in May, we were going to be under construction in the winter and early spring months. Those vestibules wouldn't have been complete until later in the school year. There would have been quite a bit of disruption throughout the school year anyway. So I think there are advantages in bidding it in the winter time frame under a typical summer project time frame. So we'll go through the proposed schedule later on, but I just wanted to make that comment before we started. So again, just a quick summary of what the project scope is and what we had discussed in May. Right now, we're looking at a phase 1 upgrade, which would be the secured vestibule construction. The newer buildings, the middle school, Shawnee, have the secured vestibules in place. So we'll be going through and looking at the older buildings which do not have those secured vestibules. We're looking also at card readers, which would replace the keypads. So rather than having a keyed access, each individual will be issued a card. That card can be programmed for certain times, certain access. After 5 p.m., that individual might not have access. So it's another way of limiting access as needed. Can be changed on the fly. And also, along with those card readers, surveillance cameras to monitor that door so that we can go back and see Mr. Simonetta swiped in. Was it actually him, or did somebody have his card at the time and was acting on his behalf? So those are really the phase 1 upgrades that we're looking for at this time. And the key part of the system will be a district-wide solution, and also one that is expandable for future phases. So potential phase 2 or future upgrades could be additional monitoring of exterior doors, door contacts, additional security cameras at locations that may be determined at a later time, and any other scope that we can either budget for or think we need for the future. The goal is to integrate it with this one system district-wide. So how we intend, or we would suggest to implement this project, would be kind of twofold. There is an existing system at several buildings. One is a Simplex system, the other is a Genetec system. It's basically just the manufacturer of the system. In order to provide the holistic, the district-wide solution, we would suggest that a state contract procurement for equipment is gone after. That would basically give the district the final say on which actual system and which components we want to be included, okay? That equipment, although it's state contract and doesn't need to necessarily be bid, the process of state contract procurement, those items have already been bid kind of behind the scenes. So there's already competitive pricing that goes into the state contract process, okay? So for the actual equipment, we're proposing state contract. The installation of devices, the door hardware, the actual construction of the secured vestibules, we are recommending to be bid under the public bidding laws. So that package we would be putting out in the late fall, early winter to get pricing back in the about January timeframe. Okay? So that's how we plan on delivering the complete project. So briefly, I just want to take you through, again, there were some minor updates to the original plans back in May, so I just want to take a few minutes to go through those updates. Starting at the high school, the main entrance being here, and again, the sketches are in the same orientation as the photo, so that will help you understand where visitor access will be. At the high school, we looked at several different options. This would be the auditorium over here. And the front doors here, we needed obviously to split faculty access from visitor access. So it's a similar setup at each building. There will be a card reader for faculty access on one set of doors. Visitor access will be through the new secured vestibule. And, you know, which doors are locked was a topic of discussion. It was reviewed at each building. And basically, there were several options at the high school. The final layout that was agreed upon was a new secured vestibule within the existing lobby, the conversion of some existing administration offices into the new secure security checkpoint, if you will, and exiting point from the vestibule. So under this scenario, people could either be queued out here in this vestibule, this door will remain locked, or within this space here, visitors could be buzzed in from the front door through the security checkpoint and physically buzzed out through that door. So there would be maintained control from the district's security standpoint who is allowed in the building. Next is Palmer Elementary. Palmer, I don't think we really had too many revisions from the initial sketch. Essentially, again, it's a card reader for faculty on the exterior door. Again, security, the lock doors would be inside. This would be a new storefront system here. And secured access would be through this new door into the office. Okay, so again, visitors would have to be buzzed through this door and into the office after introducing themselves, having visual confirmation with the office staff who is coming through the door. Tracy Elementary. Again, Tracy was a bit trickier because with a secured setup, we're basically cutting off access through the corridor. Okay, so that will be a bit of a change that the staff and students will have to adapt to as far as going up and around to get from point A to point B. But you know, that's really the only option that is feasible within this space. So again, visitor access would be through the existing front door setup. These doors here on either side of the corridor will be locked, which would force visitors to check in at the main office here before being buzzed into the office and on their way. Paxinosa, this is Northampton Street on this side of the building here. So at Paxenosa, it would be a similar setup to what is currently in place. This door would be the secured door. The intent with that is to at least get people, visitors, out of extreme weather conditions if it were raining or somehow, if weather was not cooperative. This door would be open, but this door here would be locked. So they'd have to physically be buzzed in through this door here. At which point this next door would be locked and visitors would have to go to the office, to the new single door at the office. Under this scenario, there was a conference room in this space here. That will be relocated to a new conference space in the existing locker bank further down. Okay. And Cheston, there were a couple comments on Cheston last time, and that was really due to how tight the space was and how to better separate faculty from visitors. So the original sketch with this vestibule space here, there was no separation between the two double sets of doors. So there was a recommendation, and a good one, I think, to better separate staff access, which will be on this side, with visitor access, which is on this side, with a physical separation between the two. Okay, and again, that was more due to how tight that space is. So a new security checkpoint would be constructed within the existing classroom space. This classroom would be somewhat reconstructed, the footprint would change, and security would take visitors into here, have them check in, and they would be buzzed out through this locked door here. Okay, at Forks, this was pretty similar to what we had already discussed. Again, the situation at Forks was we have a change in elevation from the exterior and initial foyer up into the building space. So a raised platform at the same level as the corridor needs to be extended out into the existing lobby. That also necessitates a chair lift, wheelchair lift, to accommodate that change in elevation. So again, there's a card reader as well as intercom to buzz in visitors. These doors up here at the top of the landing will be locked, and visitors must access through the new single door into the office space to be checked in. Okay, and finally at March, I believe this is our last one. March, again, is a situation where there's no exterior canopy. So during the day, the first exterior door will be open. That will at least get people inside the building. The secondary door in here will be secured, will be locked. Once the visitor checks in through the intercom, that door will click open. They will go up the steps. The door at the top of the steps is locked, and they will be checked in through a new single door into the office space. So you might be saying, well, where's the wheelchair lift at March? There's actually another entrance off to the side of the building, which will remain ADA handicapped access. Okay.
That's an elevator, or is that an elevator?
It's a ramp, it just comes up on
Okay,
it.
okay,
Yep.
okay, that's all. That's outside.
So again, this, the budget projection really has not changed from the May meeting. There were not many drastic changes that were made as part of the floor plans. So, especially with the secured vestibule construction, that does contribute obviously to the cost of the project. I think it would still be wise to budget the 1.4 million amount. I think we can see better than that, hopefully on bid day, but to be safe for now, I would maintain that budget. So the overall time frame for implementation, we would be looking for formal board or formal direction that we are to proceed with the bidding documents, the final construction documents, bidding documents at this time, so that we can wrap up design in the December timeframe and go out for bidding around the January timeframe, come back to you in February and seek the approval to proceed with the bids that were received. And this is good also, like I said, because between February and May, that will be time to receive submittals for the contractors to order material so that by the end of the school year, they're ready to hit the ground running and really get a lot of it knocked out early and over the summer so that it can be wrapped up for the start of the next school year.
Thank you, Josh. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Would what we're doing here, and I guess Mike would have to answer this, would this eliminate any security guards that we're trapping people into a locked-in area? I mean, would there be a security guard in that locked-in area? I mean, or who would be the one to push the button? Wouldn't it be a secretary?
It would be with the existing staff at
Yeah.
the elementaries, because they would be coming into the office.
Right, okay, but then what do we do with
We don't have security at the elementaries now.
Yeah, what?
We do not have security at the elementary schools now.
Okay, all
So
right,
there's
that was
no-
done away with last year.
Right.
Okay. But the high school, well, no, the high school you wouldn't. They're wide open areas, right?
Yeah, they're wide open and they are used throughout the day.
Yeah, right. And again, that would be, that round desk you have would be the control desk.
That's going to be removed. under
Oh,
this
that's
plan.
gonna be removed?
Along with the communications
Yeah.
booth there, that's all going to be moved into the new security office.
Okay, but there will be a security room
Mhm.
that would give access to the people coming in.
Correct. Instead of at that desk, they'll be in that room.
Yeah, right, because when you open that door, to get to that desk, you could cut off
Sure.
in many directions.
Especially when that desk is crowded and people are around.
Oh, yeah, you could go right around it and they won't see you. Especially me, as small as I am. I mean, they'll just go right around and they don't, raise my hand and with a flag, so they
Yeah, I
could
was
see
just
me.
going to ask, as the plans really come more to fruition and everything, like around the December timeframe, before going out for bid, we'll see them again?
Yes, yes.
Because I know, they're like, you and I talked, some card readers missing or this, or the next
Right,
day.
and this is basically, and at this point, it's not even a board action for next week. This is basically the revision, answering some of the comments and concerns from the last presentation, also picking up on it, with the summer, since the summer, or since last May, to allow Dewey to finalize this, and we'll come back again and say, this is what's gonna go out, tweak all that stuff.
So we really don't have any action to take next week?
No, but this is just to bring it back up on the table and say, we want to keep continuing with this. We want to address what we said we were going to do last year.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. Is the concept to have one contractor do all the construction, or are they going to split the bid up for different buildings, or?
I think it's going to be a GC.
Yeah, it's going to come down to how much incidental HVAC, electrical, do we have coming with the secured vestibules after the threshold for another prime contractor based on the scope of work. We would have to look at possibly bidding an EC or HVAC in addition to a general contractor. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have a question regarding the May to August 2014 construction phase and the what happens if, I guess my question is, what happens if we get to August and you're not near where you should be and we're ready to open schools? And my question would be, are there any kind of penalties built in? How assured can we be that that time frame really works for these projects?
We do establish a milestone schedule that is dictated in the contract. Okay, so we tell the contractor, these are your milestone dates which you must meet. If they do not, then there would be or could be liquidated damages enforced. We leave more finer scheduling up to the contractor as far as day-to-day activities. but we do tell them milestone dates. If they are not met, there could be damages enforced, correct?
John,
Yeah.
just to take that a step further, I'm
Go ahead.
expecting that we're writing the contracts because we'll be putting stuff in there about change orders and everything else.
Right.
And so that is, I don't see that as a function of Dewey or anybody else. I see that
That
that's a
would be
function
ours.
of, that's our
Good,
responsibility.
okay. The only reason I ask and raise a question, because obviously, you know, if you look at what we're doing, we're going to be disrupting virtually every building in the school system with the exception of what, just 3. And if you look at the systems disrupted, I mean, we're looking at security, transportation, along with, you know, cleaning and so forth and so on, with lots of little feet coming in and out of those. It would just seem that it would be extremely important that that schedule's really adhered to and that we get it cleaned up from the start of school.
Well, Jim, I think, you know, we should be setting that, and if you want that to be August 10th or August 1st, that's up to our responsibility to set that.
Yeah.
And we have to set that, so we get that in the contract, so when they're bidding it, they know what the dates are.
Good.
And I think the only way to attack that is doing it this aggressively in the winter, having it ready to go, everything in place for the last day of school. And I think as far as that's, even the construction schedule and buildings, I think we can meet as a team and see how we want to work that, and put that into the contract, do this building, do that building, or is it better to do, you know, do 3 at a time, and we can put that all together, we can put those parameters in.
That's a good idea.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Obviously, the 2 middle schools are not on the list, and they don't have vestibules secured now. They do?
Yeah. We did it while you were on vacation.
Janet, what it is,
Well,
administratively, they haven't implemented.
Oh, okay, all right.
If you go like, if you go into the vestibule and you go into the other doors right to the security desk instead of going into the office. So they do have, that vestibule is secure.
Those second doors would be locked, but they haven't.
Okay, thank you, all right.
Just administratively, they have to make it happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Josh. Going on to letter B, we're gonna go back to Mr. Simonetta. Water Authority inspections and correction requirements.
You all received the memo from Mr. Case regarding the requirement from the Water Authority after their inspections to do the cross connections and backflow protection requirements. We do not have a choice. What we are recommending is that it might be something, in order to do it over the summer, you know, we're shutting down the water, stuff like that, it would be something that we would want to bid out and have a contractor do that. We would solicit our engineering company to put that together. Tim has, the report is about this thing, and we just want the work to get it done. We have the date of May 14th as the deadline, but they will work with us to do it over the summer after school. But we have to do it by the end of the summer.
How often do they do these inspections?
Jim?
They went through our plumbers in September.
I'm sorry, Tim, I
They
can't.
went through with our plumbers itself in September. We were hoping to get some of these put in ourselves before we actually went and started looking at the volume of work that's involved. And that's why I had sent this to Mr. Simonetta to get Dewey involved, write the specs up, didn't have an outside contractor do all of it. This is the first time that they've been through the building. This is something new that they're mandating. If there's ways that you have connections in the schools to the mixing valve where you're mixing chemicals in the water that could get back to the regular drinking water supply. These are all going to prevent that from happening.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the high school roofing project.
This is the only change order, not the only, a change order associated with the roofing project. It is within the scope of the contingencies that we put in there. Two of the three areas were something that were recommended to do and needed. That would have been an additional cost if we would have put that in the specifications to begin with. But we're asking for the change order of $3,550 as part of the roofing project.
Questions? Okay, hearing none, moving on. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the board on the buildings and grounds items? Seeing no hands, I think that concludes it. I'm just looking, the only item that moves on to the board then is probably the school roofing project change order.
The change order, right.
Everything else is...
We don't need a motion, but is the board consensus that to have Dewey start the, develop the RFP for the water connections as required?
Typically, they would just do that.
Right, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, that concludes, brings us down, last item down here is public to be heard on non-agenda items. Drew?
One observation. About 12 years ago, I examined some of your bonds about pre-redemption, and the solicitor at the time told me I was nuts and didn't know what I was talking about. So I called my daughter, who'd started as an intern with a financial institution, and I said, go check out our bonds with your bond trading department. She says, Dad, that's on another floor, and this is a big firm. I didn't even know anybody on the bond trading department. I said, but I do know the CEO of a municipal bond trading firm. And I said, well, I guess if he's the CEO, he might know something. About an hour later, I get a phone call back with a very detailed response as to the early redemption of Pennsylvania school municipal bonds. Number one, it can be done. Number two, he had a copy of all of our recent bonds. Now, remember, this is about 12 years ago. And he wanted to know if I wanted to go down each of them, or a generic answer of yes, the language was in there that allowed for the early redemption of the bonds. And the language was this, essentially. If the board membership dropped below a quorum, it contained an automatic call feature. Okay? I says, well, how does that work? And he says, well, that's how I make my money. I go out to the school boards and I explain to them how to do it, because we do it. And I says, well, doesn't that get you a big blackball in the financial community? And he says, money's money. And no, it doesn't. It gets you respect because you know how to do it. Now, I don't know how to do it, but I recall at least 12 or 13 years ago, it was there to do. And I asked him, well, are you doing it? And he said, yeah, we've got some smart school boards that are deliberately going into technical close down for a moment or two and call their own bonds. And I said, gee, that's neat. Of course, your solicitor at the time told me I was nuts, and that was the end of the topic. And they happened to be, at the time, school authority bonds. But whenever somebody says something cannot be done, I always want to know, okay, how can it be done? And there may be ways, if there's significant money involved, that you can force the issues. Now, I don't know how many of you want to resign momentarily and then step back in to trigger it. You leave those things to your solicitor and your bond people. But again, the guy was merely the CEO of a bond trading firm that did a lot of municipal bonds in Pennsylvania, and he happened to know what he was talking about, not me. And other people were doing it. So if you say it can't be done, take a second look. Maybe it can be done. I don't know. Who am I? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else this evening? Seeing no hands, anything else from the board members?
Mr. Fano, we didn't hear from Mr. Simonetta regarding the duplicating.
No, we asked to pull that.
Oh,
That was-
sorry.
Anything else?
Just want to, since time will be of an issue, I just wanted to bring up the opportunity that we didn't mention it. But I don't know if people got an email regarding it, but the PSBA is holding a seminar, a webinar, and it's on the 17th of September, and it's the noon time. So I just wanted to let the other board members know. Actually, I think you're,
That's what I'd like to know.
it's regarding the new evaluations and
Oh,
stuff.
yes, that's right. We were done the whole lot.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I just comment, I will be away next week on vacation. Only chance we have to get away and, yeah, that's right, it's one of those things.
Hearing no other comments, we will adjourn this meeting.
I move we adjourn.